It's hard to forget someone when you never really touched them. Being in a relationship with someone who has avoidant attachment leaves behind a strange kind of grief. You don't lose someone on the outside, you lose someone you never truly had. They were there, texting you, holding you, even saying the right words, but you always felt like an invisible wall stood between you. You could never fully enter their emotional world, no matter how gently you knocked. With patience, with love, even by slowly erasing parts of yourself just to make them feel comfortable. But here's what no one tells you. Avoidants feel pain too. They just feel it after you do. They don't realize what they've lost when you're still trying to hold on. They realize it when you finally stop trying. And in that exact moment, when you choose to come back to yourself instead of trying to prove your worth to them, that's when they're hit with the truth. They lost the one person who loved them without losing themselves. This video is for you, the one who loved an avoidant deeply, the one who tried to understand, who waited, and finally chose growth over chasing. You need to know this. They may never say it out loud, but they deeply regret it. And that regret, it's not because you left, it's because you weren't the same person by the time you did. In the inner world of someone with avoidant attachment, love is not a relaxing experience. For them, love doesn't come with safety or ease. Love is an alert system. It's a nervous system on edge, shaped by past memories where closeness meant pressure, obligations, or emotional overwhelm. It's not that they don't know how to love, it's that they've paid a price before for letting people get too close. And so, disconnection becomes a survival reflex. In that landscape, someone who stays calm while loving them feels like a rare phenomenon, a person who gets close without making them feel trapped, someone who doesn't chase, doesn't demand, doesn't emotionally manipulate, someone who doesn't need to prove themselves to be chosen. They simply show up steady and kind. And that calm presence is exactly what confuses avoidants the most, and what they miss the most once it's gone. They're not used to a love they don't have to fight for. They're not used to someone who becomes deeper the quieter they are. And they're certainly not used to someone who can love them without sacrificing themselves in the process. Avoidants often gravitate toward chaotic emotional dynamics, where they can either stay in control or retreat. The moment intimacy feels dangerous. So when someone loves them quietly, they don't know where to place that person in their internal map. And instead of moving closer, they pull away. Not because the person did something wrong, but because their nervous system doesn't recognize this kind of love as safe. Not yet. But here's the irony. When that person walks away, what's left is not relief, it's emptiness. And that's where regret quietly begins. Because over time, when avoidants encounter new relationships with people who pressure them, demand more, or vanish the moment they need space, they begin to compare in silence. And they realize, someone once loved them without control, understood them without judgment, stayed without clinging. That person didn't chase, but didn't leave in anger either. That person embodied mature love, and now they can feel the void that presence left behind. But by the time they realize that, it's usually too late. Because the calm one doesn't wait. The calm one doesn't beg. They don't need you to feel whole. But they didn't love you halfway either. They once loved you with full presence, with integrity, with a peaceful heart. And when they leave, they don't leave to punish you. They leave because they love themselves just as much as they once loved you. And that's why avoidants deeply regret losing someone like that. Not because of what they did, but because they weren't emotionally mature enough to value the good when it was in front of them. Not because you created chaos, but because you didn't. You didn't chase, dramatize, or panic. You let them be. And when you left, you kept that same calm, and that hurt more than any words could have. If calmness makes avoidance feel safe in connection, then respect for their space makes them feel free within love itself. And the paradox is, they crave freedom, yet fear abandonment. They withdraw not to leave you, but to find their own breath again, to emotionally regulate, to ease the overwhelm that intimacy can trigger. But very few people understand that. Most people, when someone they love starts pulling away, going quiet, growing cold, immediately react from fear. I'm being abandoned. They don't love me anymore. I did something wrong. And from that fear comes neediness, control, or emotional panic. For the avoidant, those reactions only reinforce the belief. Closeness always brings pressure. Better to shut down. That's why, when they meet someone who can respect their need for space without feeling rejected or hurt, it touches them at a very deep level. They feel understood without having to explain. They are allowed to step back without being punished. And more than anything, they get to experience a kind of love that doesn't come with obligation. You don't need them to reply instantly. You don't spiral when they go quiet for a few days. You don't read distance as abandonment. You read it as a need to regulate, and you give them that space. And because of that, you're one of the rare people who made them feel they could still be themselves while being loved. That love didn't suffocate them. It didn't demand performance. It didn't force them to choose between staying and leaving. You created a middle ground, a place where connection and freedom could coexist. At first, they didn't know what to do with that. Your calm made them uneasy. They were so used to emotional chaos that they grew suspicious when nothing dramatic happened. And so, they may have pulled away again, not because you did anything wrong, but because they weren't yet equipped to trust love that doesn't pressure. But when you didn't chase, when you didn't guilt them or emotionally trap them and still held your ground and your self-respect, you left a profound imprint. Even if they never say it, they know they lost a kind of connection that's rare and hard to find again. Because after you, they might meet people who don't understand that their distance is survival, not a power move. They'll meet those who guilt them for needing space, or abandon them instantly for not giving enough. And only then will they realize someone once gave them space without leaving. Someone who didn't take distance as an insult. Someone who didn't use silence as punishment. Someone who truly knew how to love without violating another's emotional boundaries. And that kind of person is exactly who avoidants deeply regret losing. Not because you were too easy or gave too much, but because you gave right. You didn't love them from fear. You loved them from understanding that love doesn't always mean closeness. Sometimes, it's knowing when to step back so you don't ruin what's still good. And the deepest regret they carry is not seeing your worth until you were gone. But it's not just calmness or space that avoidants end up regretting. There's a deeper, rarer kind of connection, one that leaves an even more lasting imprint. When someone sees past their emotional walls and still doesn't leave. You weren't fooled by their coldness. You didn't assume they were heartless, emotionally immature, or incapable of love. You understood that each time they pulled away, froze up, or went silent, it wasn't a tactic. It was protection. You saw the wounded child inside, not just the guarded adult outside. And because you didn't respond with hurt or anger, but instead with quiet understanding and grounded presence, you created an emotional experience they'd never truly had before. You gave them a moment of unfamiliar safety. Am I being seen without being judged? That's something avoidants rarely experience in life. They often grow up in environments where emotions were dangerous, where showing vulnerability meant getting hurt or dismissed. And so they carry the belief into adulthood. No one truly understands me. No one stays long enough to reach the soft part of me. But then you came along. You didn't need them to explain everything. You noticed the smallest shifts, the gaze that drifted, the long pause, the vague answer. You heard the things they didn't say, and you didn't force them to open up to be worthy of love. That's what made you different. You saw through the armor, but never tried to tear it down. You stood there patient, respectful, unintrusive. No one taught you how to love someone with avoidant attachment, but your heart somehow understood what they needed. Not invasion, but recognition. Not a question like, "Why are you so cold?" but a presence that says, "I'm here when you're ready." The heartbreaking part is avoidants don't know how to receive that kind of understanding when it's happening. They don't trust it. They assume it won't last. They push you away to see if you'll stay. And sometimes, your empathy makes them feel exposed, because for the first time, someone has touched what they've hidden their whole life. And if you eventually walk away, not because you don't care, but because they never let you in, you leave behind a silence that echoes. You become the person who once saw them without needing proof, who neither chased nor abandoned, who said more through presence than through words. "I see you, and I'm not afraid of the part you're hiding." End quote, end quote. Later, when they find themselves in other relationships where their walls are labeled immature, manipulative, or unworthy, they'll remember you as the one person who didn't demand they change to be loved. Not everyone has the patience to stay calm through silence. Not everyone has the strength to stay present when pushed away. And very few people can keep their heart open in front of someone who doesn't let anyone in. That's why avoidants carry the memory of you long after you're gone. Not because you were perfect, but because you were rare. Not because you said the deepest things, but because you saw what everyone else missed, and you didn't flinch when you saw it. And then there's a type of person avoidants never forget, not because they stayed, but because they knew when to walk away and how to grow from the pain. This is the person who didn't chase when the avoidant pulled away, who didn't beg, didn't lower themselves for half-hearted love. Instead, they quietly returned to themselves and used the distance the avoidant created as an opportunity to upgrade their inner world. They didn't disappear out of hurt, they stepped back out of self-respect. They didn't grow to prove anything, they grew because they knew. Personal evolution is the one thing that never betrays you. Avoidants may not say it, but they feel it. They feel the silence no longer carries pain, but a strange kind of peace. They notice the energy shift from fragile to grounded, and it's that calm power that shakes them the most. Because avoidants are used to a repeating emotional script. They withdraw, the other person follows. They go silent, the other person pleads. They avoid, the other person scrambles to prove their worth. And in that cycle, they stay in control but never feel truly safe. Until they meet someone who refuses to play the game. Someone who doesn't participate in emotional tug-of-war. Someone who's willing to let them go without creating damage. Someone who chooses to heal, to reflect, and no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. What avoidants remember most isn't the pain you showed, it's how radiant you became after they left. You didn't drown in your history. You didn't use love as a reason to stay in pain. You used it as raw material, to grow, to strengthen, to deepen. And what they regret most is looking back and seeing you, the version of you now who is no longer the same person they once knew. You're no longer waiting, explaining, or longing to be understood. You're living your life fully, passionately, brightly, without needing anyone to validate your worth. In their silence, they realize, I pushed away someone who only got better without me. Will 1s to it 9. That growth didn't make you distant, it made you irreplaceable. And that's something the avoidant can't ignore. Because in a world full of relationships based on chasing, they once met someone who chose to rise instead of cling. And you leave behind a memory that isn't visual, it's visceral. The memory of someone who once loved them without losing themselves, and when not loved in return, still chose to love their life even more. After everything, the person an avoidant misses the most is not the one who loved them the most, but the one who loved them without losing themselves. You didn't melt into them. You didn't shrink to fit into the world they created. You didn't sacrifice your dreams, values, or identity just to stay in a half-present love. You could love someone with all your heart, but you never gave away your strong and mature sense of self. And that was both magnetic and terrifying for the avoidant. Because they're used to two kinds of people: those who cling, willing to lose themselves just to keep the connection, and those who walk away, withdrawing when their needs aren't met. But you were neither. You loved them fully, but you didn't give up yourself as the price. You didn't try to save the relationship by erasing your boundaries. You didn't endure emotional starvation just to stay connected. You didn't remain in a space that made you small. And you never used love as an excuse to abandon your self-respect. To an avoidant, you were the most beautiful contradiction. Someone who could be close, yet still emotionally free. Your emotional independence wasn't cold, it was magnetic. You didn't need anyone to feel complete, and that made your love more real. You didn't depend on them to exist, and that's what made your choice to love them carry true weight. And when they lost you, what they missed most wasn't just your presence, it was your inner solidity. They may meet others who adore them, chase them, or sacrifice for them, but it's rare to find someone who can love and stay whole at the same time. Because your love didn't come from lack. It didn't come from an unhealed wound. It didn't come from fear. It came from a place of inner abundance and a conscious choice. You didn't stay because you needed them. You stayed because you wanted to build something together if they were willing. And when they weren't ready, you didn't rage, manipulate, or beg. You simply stood up, walked away, and took your whole self with you. That's what made you irreplaceable. Not because you were perfect, but because you were strong enough to love without disappearing. Avoidants may never say a word. They might not text, apologize, or admit anything, but they remember you. Not the old version of you, but the person they quietly know they may never find again. And if you're someone who once loved an avoidant with patience, with understanding, with your whole heart, then the first thing you need to know is you were not wrong for loving that way. You weren't weak for waiting. You weren't foolish for trying. And you were never lacking just because someone couldn't receive the love you offered. Because the truth is, not everyone is emotionally ready to accept a safe kind of love. A love that doesn't control. A love that doesn't panic. A love that doesn't lose itself. And if you're the kind of person an avoidant quietly regrets, then that also means you're the kind of person who deserves to be cherished, not corrected. You once tried to enter someone's emotional world, a world locked up, guarded, unsure. You adjusted, softened, stayed kind so you wouldn't hurt them. But eventually, you also learned how to stop when the only thing coming back was distance and silence. You chose yourself, and you still know how to love without sacrificing your peace ever again. Your journey doesn't end in someone else's regret. It continues on the path where you grow, heal, and rise more brightly each day. And the person who's right for you won't just feel sorry they lost you. They'll feel lucky to walk beside you every step of the way. They won't ask you to shrink in order to stay. They won't leave you carrying the emotional weight for two. They won't make you wonder again and again, am I enough? They will show up when you no longer need to be chosen, because you've already learned to choose yourself first.